Every afternoon, Officer James Carter sat on the same park bench with the same brown paper bag in his hand, and every afternoon he shared his lunch with a woman named Gloria. Gloria was homeless. She had been living on the streets for years, and most people walked past her as if she didn't exist. But not James. From the very first day he saw her sitting alone, wrapped in an old tattered coat, he felt something stir in his chest. She reminded him of his mother, who had struggled to raise him alone after his father left. He knew what it was like to feel invisible, to feel like the world had moved on without you. He had seen it too many times, in too many faces, and he refused to let Gloria become just another person lost in the crowd. One day he walked up to her with an extra sandwich in his bag and simply asked, "Mind if I sit?" Gloria had looked at him with weary eyes, studying him like she was waiting for the punchline to a cruel joke. But when she saw the kindness in his face, she just nodded. That's how it started. Every day after that, James brought an extra lunch, and they sat together, talking about life, about the world, about everything and nothing. She told him how she had once been a teacher, how she lost her job after an illness, and without family to fall back on, she ended up on the streets. She spoke of the people who ignored her, of the nights spent shivering, of the loneliness that sometimes felt worse than hunger. She told him about the dreams she used to have, about the books she loved, and the students she missed teaching. She had so much life inside her, but the world had turned its back on her. It was as if she had been erased, as if she no longer mattered. James listened. He didn't judge, didn't offer empty words of pity. He just sat beside her and made sure she had a meal, even if it was just for a little while. He made sure she knew someone cared. And over time, Gloria started to open up more. She laughed sometimes, a soft, almost forgotten sound that made James smile. Then one day, Gloria didn't show up. James sat on that bench, his extra sandwich growing cold in his hands. He told himself maybe she was just somewhere else today. But the next day, she wasn't there either. And the day after that, panic settled in his chest. He asked around, checked the usual places she might go. No one had seen her. The city had too many stories like hers, people disappearing, fading into the background of a world too busy to notice. But James refused to let her be forgotten. He knew that if he didn't find her, no one would. Finally, after days of searching, he found her. She was in the hospital, frail and weak. She had collapsed from exhaustion and hunger, and someone had finally called an ambulance. James sat by her bedside, gripping her hand. "You scared me," he said softly. Gloria gave him a weak smile. "Didn't mean to?" That night, James made a decision. He wasn't going to let her go back to the streets. He made calls, pulled every string he could. He found a shelter that would take her in, a program that could help her get back on her feet. He spoke with social workers, made arrangements, and promised himself that he would do whatever it took to make sure she had a second chance. When she was finally well enough to leave the hospital, he was there waiting, just like always, with a bag of food in his hand. Only this time, it wasn't for a park bench. It was for a place she could call home. Gloria looked at him with tears in her eyes. "Why do you care so much?" James squeezed her hand and smiled, because no one should have to go through this alone. And for the first time in years, Gloria had hope. Because sometimes all it takes is one person who refuses to look away. And in a world that so often turns its back on the forgotten, James chose to see her. He chose to care. Over time, Gloria started to rebuild her life. With the help of the shelter's resources, she found work as a tutor for children in need. She still carried the memories of the hard years on the streets, but now she also carried something else, belonging. And every now and then, she'd return to that same park bench, just to sit for a moment and remember the officer who reminded her that she was worth saving. One day, James found himself walking past the old bench, this time without an extra sandwich in his hand. But he didn't feel sadness, he felt pride, because he knew that Gloria was out there, living, thriving, and that was all he had ever wanted for her. As he continued his patrol, he thought about how small acts of kindness could change lives. He knew he couldn't save everyone, but that wouldn't stop him from trying. Because in the end, that was what truly mattered. Choosing to see, choosing to care, and choosing to make a difference in whatever way he could.